Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is a game that released for the Nintendo Switch in 2024 starring a ghost girl named Vivian and her journey transitioning to a woman. At least, that's what you think it was about based on what you hear about this game. Yes, despite the game that was one of the most requested remakes slash remasters slash ports of all time finally releasing, all I see people online talking about is the fact that Vivian here had some minor dialogue changes to better reflect the original Japanese release. These dialogue changes specifically changing some rather filler text with text outright specifying that Vivian is indeed a trans woman. Cool. And that is how everyone should be reacting to this. A simple, oh that's cool, or oh okay. But of course not, because trans people simply are not treated like people now. I have seen people from both sides of the argument completely and utterly disgustingly speak of trans people like they're not regular people like you or I or anybody else. Left-leaning, right-leaning, pro-trans and transphobic, all groups have contributed to this, and I don't know about some of you out there. As a trans woman myself, this is beyond upsetting and is part of a much bigger ongoing issue that has genuinely led to a sharp increase of stress and mental issues in my life. To start off, let's go over the more obvious problem, the transphobes. Now, even if you completely and utterly hate trans people for whatever asinine reason you may have, making a forum post bitching and whining about the fact that a couple of lines of dialogue in a children's video game were changed to fix actual censorship is a completely laughable display, and anybody throwing a fit over it is completely pathetic. Vivian is a fictional character. Why do you care if she is trans? This is genuinely one of the most inconsequential things to be upset about in a video game ever. It doesn't impact the gameplay, the visuals, the music. The only thing changed here is a detail about a character, which isn't even changed when, once again, this is literally a fix of the censorship brought upon by the English GameCube version of the game. This also isn't one of those trans characters who spends every waking moment letting you know that they are trans. This is a perfectly written trans character in the sense that it's a normal character who just so happens to be trans. Vivian not being trans would change nothing about her design, and every bit of dialogue could easily be rewritten to completely write out Vivian being trans. And not only would it be incredibly easy, but you wouldn't even know it in the first place. I know this because that's what I experienced. I played the original game in English, saw Vivian, assumed she was a woman based on her name and design. The dialogue didn't make me think otherwise. Only years later to hear about her apparently being trans. The English censorship, while I obviously disagree with the decision to include it, I'm so glad it does exist because it proves what I just said and ultimately shows how good a trans representation Vivian truly is. She is simply a woman who just so happens to be trans. If you watching this, or anybody you know, is genuinely upset or angry over this character being trans, why? Why does it upset you? Why does it matter? It doesn't affect the game in any way. It is a minor detail about an individual character. And now, I'm going to talk about the completely opposite end of this argument, the side that often goes overlooked in their damage to the reputation and general perception to trans people. The pro-trans people. So, how do people in support of trans people ultimately contribute to the growing stigmatisation similarly contributed by transphobes? By treating trans people like motherfucking unicorns, of course. See, when the remake released, I saw multiple people genuinely, unironically, without a hint of irony, say that the main reason, or sometimes the only reason they were buying this version of the game, was because of Vivian now being trans. Don't do this. Or if you do, don't tell people publicly. Or better yet, if you like trans people so much you'd buy a brand new Nintendo game just because there is a single trans character in it, donate to a trans charity. Because if you really, really care about trans people that much, I don't think it's a stretch or an extrapolation to suggest you spend that money donating instead. Buying this game does nothing to support trans people, which may seem obvious, but I'm not even pulling your leg when I tell you I saw someone who was an adult who did not understand the concept of game developers getting money from being paid to work on the game instead of the profits produced from the sales of the game. Buying this game in no way would have money reach to people who fix the censorship. By treating the character in this over-exaggeratory, celebratory way based on the minor detail about them, you're contributing to the perception of trans people being irregular, when in all reality, all they collectively want is to be treated like any other person would be. If you continue to give special treatment to characters like Vivian based on them being trans, you undermine their representation in media by doing the exact opposite of what good representation of them strives for, normalizing trans people. Vivian is a good character because she's a trans woman who is written like a woman. Vivian isn't a good character just because she is trans. Vivian would be a bad character if her whole identity was based around her being trans and her bringing it up constantly. If you've watched this whole video, thanks for listening. This is a growing issue that nobody's properly addressing with the attention it deserves, and I implore you to spread this video around to get the message out there.